Part 1. Islamic Society. Ijtihad, the dynamic force. The basic objective of both revival and revolution, whether in the socio-political field or in the realm of religion, is to correct the wrong. There is a fundamental difference, however, between the motives and modus operandi of the two. The revival is preceded by a process of dispassionate thinking and critical scrutiny of the given situation. Well-meaning souls coolly and thoroughly examine the objective reality, determine the causes of corruption as is its extent, try to evolve steps to retrieve the damage, and then use the corrective force only to the extent inevitable to remove those causes and improve the situation. On the contrary, revolution has its genesis in a seething anger and burning urge for revolt. The process of violent change lets one wrong replace another. The intemperance that upsets the situation is encountered by yet another intemperance, which destroys the good along with the bad. There is no doubt that a revivalist also has to do what a revolutionary does. Both target only the rotten part of the body to remove the rot. The difference, however, is that the revivalist, like a seasoned surgeon, first gathers his data about the exact nature and extent of the damage needed to be corrected, and then proceeds to operate using the knife only to the extent needed. He has the balm ready simultaneously for the wound. The revolutionary, on the other hand, goes headlong to operate. His burning passion for revolt hardly gives him the opportunity to differentiate the right from the wrong. He has hardly any time to think of a healing balm, and when that time comes, if at all, it is already too late. When the situation gets too bad, the suffering people generally lose patience, and also the sense of balance to let them think coolly of remedial measures. Such situations, therefore, often lead the revolutionary movements to go for a violent change, instead of a sustained campaign to improve and revive. Serious conflict erupts between the conservatives and progressives, which adds more fuel to the raging fire of anger and revolt. Both these groups move to the extreme limits of obstinacy and defiance, and thus both immensely damage the cause of truth and righteousness. On the one side, extreme force is used to defend the wrong instead of the right, and on the other, attack is launched on everything irrespective of it being right or wrong. On their victory, the revolutionaries destroy everything of the old order, whether good or bad. The revolution marches on like a flood and indiscriminately sweeps away everything in its path. It wakes up to the need of reconstruction only after having caused enormous destruction. The revolutionary mindset, however, has its own peculiar inhibitions. Efforts are made to do away with everything inherited from the conservatives. Everything of the old order, howsoever correct it might be, becomes to them an anathema. Thereafter, the tortuous road to reconstruction passes through various phases of trial and error. When the revolutionary mindset is eventually tired of its experimentations, it discovers a roadmap of moderation. This is a roadmap that revivalist is expected to always have before himself from the very starting point. The position of the revivalist and the revolutionary is best explained by the following Persian adage. What the wise one does, the simpleton does too, but only after having wrought much damage. The best example of the revolutionary's predicament in our modern times is that of the Bolshevik Revolution. When the corrupt social order of Tsarist Russia became intolerable to the local population, it gave rise to a revolutionary movement. Europe's socialist and democratic ideology started attracting the Russians. The Tsarist authority in turn used every tool of repression to crush popular sentiment and safeguard its vested interests. This caused the seething anger of the revolutionaries against royal despotism and the unjust distribution of wealth to spill over into the entire fabric of Russia's century-old civilizational system. Lenin emerged in Moscow as a reincarnation of Karl Marx. The Tsar was dethroned, and along with him was destroyed each and every segment of the old socio-political, economic, cultural, and religious legacy of the past. Following this wholesale destruction, attempts were made to establish a new social order based on socialist ideology. Bolsheviks devoted all their energies in attempts to remove every trace of the bourgeois legacy. They even went to the extreme of banishing God from Soviet Russia. With the passage of time, however, a saner, constructive approach finally took over the revolutionary madness, and Bolshevik extremism gradually returned to the point of moderation. Similar extremism was witnessed during the French Revolution. The revolutionary zealots there also tried to destroy all the good and the bad of the old order and to evolve and introduce new revolutionary concepts and formulas. But the chaotic upsurge left France in a state of turmoil, and it took quite some time to achieve the level of political, social, and civilizational moderation and stability that we find in France today. Turkey presents yet another example of revolution, where attempts were made to transform overnight, almost by a magic wand, a whole nation into another. While rushing through the surgical operation, the healthy parts of its body were also removed, along with the rotten ones, and in their place new limbs were imported from Europe and transplanted. The revolutionaries went to the extent of replacing the old brain by a new one, imported complete with its new headgear. But as time passes, the Turks are now growing to realize that everything old cannot be discarded as bad, and all that is new should not be taken at its face value. They have, therefore, retracted in many cases from the extremist course to the path of moderation and equanimity. Whatever has been said here is in context with the revolutionary crisis now on the rise among the Indian Muslims. Before the negative fallout of this crisis starts showing, we would like to counsel both the conservatives and the progressives to check their steps and ponder, for a while, to avoid falling headlong into the morass of a social chaos. Today, the situation in British India is as bad as it was or is in Turkey and elsewhere in the Muslim world. The particular group in whose hands our religious leadership has been for centuries has turned Islam into something monolithic and static. It is perhaps since the 6th or 7th century Hijrah that this group has refused to change its calendar. In their scholastic philosophy, they do teach that the world is ever changing, but practically speaking, they have kept their eyes shut from the changes taking place in time and space. Today, the worldly situations, thoughts, trends, and ideologies have undergone total transformation, and the socio-political issues and problems are no more the same now as they were before. Our traditional religious leaders, however, still regard themselves as though they were living in the same environment of 5-6 centuries back. They have remained unmoved by the new changes and the challenges, and instead their efforts have been to prevent their community from bravely facing the challenges of the time. They have in fact tried to draw it backward from every forward move. These efforts did succeed for a while, but such success can never be everlasting. No community can live in isolation. In its interaction and dealings with the world, it is bound to be influenced by fresh ideas and emerging issues. If the community leaders fail to remain in the vanguard of such changes and lead it correctly through the thorny pathways of the new developments, it eventually becomes the community's responsibility to throw away the yoke of their leadership from its aching shoulders. The root cause of the malice facing us today lies in fact elsewhere. Our religious leadership has been so much involved in side issues that they lost track of the real ones. The side issues then replaced the principal ones, from where cropped up thousands upon thousands of offshoots, which eventually came to be regarded as true Islam, though mostly of no relevance to Islam at all. The edifice of the nation of Islam, Al-Ummah al-Islamiyah, was raised on a well-defined order wherein the Quran occupied the topmost position, followed by the Sunnah of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then ijtihad, the inductive method of scholarly interpretation of juridical issues in light of the guidelines provided for the purpose by the Quran and the Sunnah. Unfortunately, however, this order was reversed to the effect that ijtihad by the jurists of a particular period was given the topmost position, followed by the Sunnah, and then lastly the Quran. It is actually this reversal of the original order in the last 600-700 years that has led to the current stagnation and turned Islam into a static and undynamic entity. No one can deny the eminent position held by the leading commentators of the Quran, Mufassirin, the scholars of the prophetic traditions, Muhaddithin, and the founders of various schools of Islamic jurisprudence, A'imah al-Fiqh al-Islamiyah. Their contribution in promoting the Islamic sciences and profound projection of the Islamic message and mission is undoubtedly immense. They use the faculties of reason and insight to delve deep into the Quran and the Sunnah and draw conclusions and formulate details concerning various laws and precepts. Their scholarly interpretations thus serve as a guide and help to the Ummah. Those cannot, however, become in themselves the original source and fountainhead of legislation. Our eminent jurists were great mujtahid, scholars of juridical issues, but their ijtihad can in no way become a permanent statute of abiding principle because of the limitations of time and space circumscribing human knowledge and intellect. Allah alone is free from the limitations of time and space. He is the ultimate source of knowledge, and it is His knowledge that is not the least affected by the changing times. The Quran and the Prophet of Islam ﷺ are the glorious receptacles of the divine knowledge and wisdom, and hence they alone can be the source from where the seeker of knowledge can always get the required wisdom, thoughts and precepts for guidance according to the needs of all times and situations. As long as the ulama and religious scholars continued gathering enlightenment and knowledge from this pristine source and resolving theoretical and practical problems of their age through their carefully researched deductions, ijtihad, Islam continued marching on with the time. When, however, this process stopped and was replaced by blind followership, taqlid, and the views of the old legists and scholars were accorded the sanctity similar to that of the texts of the Quran and the Sunnah, Islam's intellectual progress came to a grinding halt. The exponents of Islamic sciences and torch hearers of the divine knowledge thus, unfortunately, became bogged down in the labyrinths of peripheral issues. Instead of leading the world into the new vistas of thought and action, they were content with engaging their talents in frivolous matters. This eventually gave rise to factional conflicts, and there emerged different sects and factions. Those belonging to a different sect or school of thought were generously labeled as kafir, unbeliever. It was such a sad spectacle to see the spirit of love, brotherhood, compassion, communal harmony, and solidarity, which had been the hallmark of the Muslim social milieu, giving way to those very characteristics which the Quran ascribes to the unbelievers and hypocrites. What we are witnessing in our society today is a result of backward swing of that pendulum. When the Muslim intelligentsia noticed that their religious leadership was not properly performing the duty of the community's guidance, and instead of taking them forward was dragging them backwards, they started getting out of the ulama's control, and like an army under no one's command, wandered all over. There was a group of Muslims that attributed all blame for the fumbles and foibles of those self-appointed champions of religion to Islam itself. They considered religion as the biggest hurdle in the way of their progress and openly preached against it, and in favor of following the example of the advanced nations of the world. There was yet another group that took upon itself to abuse and malign the ulama and religious leaders, as if by abusing them they were serving the cause of Islam and Muslims. A section of the self-anointed scholars of Islam started pruning the religion itself. There were some who cast aspersions against the eminent scholars of the past, while others took the prophetic traditions in their stride. There were also those who went to the extreme of venturing to introduce amendments even in the Quranic injunctions. Some zealots thought in terms of separating the state from religion, because they believed that religion should be restricted to the spheres of beliefs, rites, and rituals, leaving aside the state's mundane matters. Thus, a number of groups rose to avowedly change the prevailing situation. Yet they were not so much for revival as for revolution. They did not bother to coolly analyze what had actually gone wrong. Where lay the root causes of the malice, and how could it be effectively cured? Theirs was all a guesswork, but the surgical operation continued at will, without ascertaining the exact nature of the disease and the extent of surgery required. That is the reason why we are often forced to counter the radicals more fiercely than the conservatives. Though we agree with them in principle about the need to bring about a change in the prevailing situation, we are at the same time very keen to replace society's stagnation by dynamism. That does not mean, nonetheless, to abandon or deviate from the true Islamic path for the sake of modernization. We cannot similarly approve of any attempt to amend or add in matters of religious significance without any serious research and true Islamic scholarship. It is similarly not proper to unwittingly dismantle the magnificent structure which the eminent Muslim jurists, fuqaha, and religious leaders of the past raised with so much hard work and dedication. It would be obnoxious similarly to reject the entire treasure house of hadith, prophetic traditions, on one pretext or the other, or bring about any amendment in the word of God. All these are measures not of reform, but more of perversion and damage. The only cure for the malice affecting the Muslim Ummah today is to set right once again the order that has been reversed. Let the Quran assume the position of leadership and preeminence that has always belonged to it. Let a hadith occupy the place given to them by no less a person than Sayyidina Rasulullah himself, as well as by his companions and Ahl al-Bayt, members of his family. Allah's blessings, peace and mercy be upon the Prophet, his illustrious companions and the glorious family. Let the great contributions made by the Muslim jurists, theologians, commentators and transmitters of the prophetic traditions be given the same status as is their due. Let us make the best use of this great legacy and keep in place the things not needed to be changed. Let us also keep in mind at the same time that the scholarly works of our fuqaha, mufassirin and muhaddithin do not occupy the position of a permanent statute, nor have their books made us independent of the need of studies and reflection in the Quran and the Sunnah, and the door can never be closed for direct access to them. The moment we restore this reversed order, the Islamic trail will start blazing once again. As discussed, the principal cause of the present stagnation is that the locomotive that pulls the train has been detached and placed behind. The driver has also been removed from his position and put somewhere in the back seat, while in our simplicity or ignorance, we think that the front bogie can itself move and keep the train going forward. The task of restoring the reversed order, however, needs to be carried out with full patience and perseverance. There is no need of any anger or haste. Whatever has happened did not happen intentionally. Nobody can blame any particular group of religious scholars for being responsible for the present state of stagnation and hampering the onward march of Islamic knowledge. This is a result of the general decline that the Muslim Ummah is facing since around the last 10 centuries in its political, military, economic, and civilizational process. This decadence has not only adversely affected the world of Islam's spirit of jihad, organized struggle against the forces of evil, but also the capability of ijtihad. The Muslims' outlook has changed not only regarding the various issues they face in life, but also about their religious and academic matters, and gradually a spectre of decay has set in unnoticed on all their intellectual faculties. Neither the ulama nor their followers can be blamed for this sad development. Nothing positive can either be achieved by just laying blame on any particular quarter or revolting in anger against the current malice. The only way to redeem the situation is to coolly reflect on it and try to discover the root cause of the present state of affairs and then sagaciously change it for the better.